Thank you for tuning in to Screaming from the Sidelines here on Believe, presented by betonline.ag. If you're looking to cash in some bets throughout this postseason, you can head on over to their website today and get started with an awesome welcome bonus, even for you Californians. I'm pleased to be joined by somebody who's not only a diehard for the Golden State Warriors, but is also incredibly accomplished both inside and outside of the podcast world. Cyrus Saatsaz is an award-winning journalist and professor who was formerly with well-known media outlets like USA Today, KCBS All News Radio, the San Francisco Chronicle, my personal favorite, KNBR, and many more. He is the host of Rick Barry's House here on Believe, and also the dedicated host of the 5 days a week Locked On Warriors. Thank you so much for squeezing this into your schedule.
Yeah,
I know
man.
It's been a crazy last couple of days.
No, thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure, and thanks for doing your research on me. Yeah, every time I hear stuff like that, I'm like, damn, I'm old, and because you can't do all that amount of stuff if you live the short life. So, but thanks for having me on, Greg. It's a pleasure, man.
No, of course. And look, as someone who just turned 24 this last weekend, I can assure you that I don't see it as old that way at all. I love the energy. Like Locked On Warriors was my comfort show all throughout last spring during the playoff run when I was getting ready to move out of Santa Barbara and doing a lot of DoorDash runs, getting some extra money. So
Yeah,
I'm all about it.
Oh, dude. I mean, so you were going to UC Santa Barbara? Was that your school?
Yeah, that's where I was.
Yeah, I went. I was going to school. I was a neighbor of yours. I mean, different decades, but like I was going to school in SLO at Cuesta and then briefly at Cal Poly before I kind of realized like truly what the right roadmap was for me in my career. And so I transferred to San Francisco State to finish there. But I was in SLO for 3 years, and I teach there now at Cuesta College, and they're phenomenal students. But dude, I love Santa Barbara, man. That is paradise. And like you, man, I had to work 3 jobs throughout all of college, whether it was my undergrad or graduate studies. So I totally get doing the grind, brother. It's respect. That's all I can say.
Well, respect to San Luis Obispo. My one of my youngest cousins actually just committed to Cal Poly, so I had to put all the rivalry aside and just tell her what an awesome accomplishment that is and how much she loves it, or she will love it. And that area is great. I got no qualms with the Central Coast, and I guess Santa Barbara being, I don't know, slight SoCal is however people want to label that one, but that's all beside the point. We've got so much to discuss ahead of Game 3, which is happening in just a couple of hours. And by the way, you can follow Cyrus on Twitter at DogSurf Roadshow, and you can follow me at Greg OH Silver. Let's go through some top headlines, and then we'll get to the NorCal Clash. First news that I saw this morning, which was really exciting, was that the WNBA and the EW Scripps Company have signed a multi-year agreement to televise games on Friday nights during the regular season on ION, which is a national entertainment network that reaches every U.S. TV household over the air. So WNBA Friday Night Spotlight on ION will feature games during 2 windows on Friday nights over 15 weeks from May 26th to September 8th. Cyrus, I got to ask you before we keep going with anything else, do you have a WNBA team, or are you kind of just waiting for one to come to the Bay Area?
That's exactly what I'm doing. I think when the WNBA first started, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think there was a Bay Area team. And then I can't remember where they moved to, but no, man, because the WNBA, especially Caitlin Clark, like watching her play, I feel like in any professional sport, you need transcendent stars to really turn the league into something just global and massively huge. And like the impact Magic and Bird had on the NBA was absolutely incredible. I mean, Major League Baseball has had players for decades, if not over a century, but I also feel like Major League Baseball is struggling with that right now because I don't know if they have one. My point is with the WNBA, Caitlin Clark really is an exciting player to watch, man. Like you just start rooting for her, watching her play. And with that said, I mean, Joe Lacob has also said that he wants to invest in an expansion franchise in the Bay Area for a WNBA team. Which A is exciting because if that happens, that's obviously going to be our team, right? I imagine. And B, it also shows that Joe Lacob has a ton of money. So spend your damn money on helping Steph and not just getting an expansion WNBA team. Please, Joe, please.
Yeah, I like promoting both women's basketball and the Warriors in the same punch. That is very important. And I agree with you, man, on Caitlin Clark. Like I had a video that I put out before the Final Four that got a lot of traction, just talking about Caitlin Clark's larger influence on the game. And the reason that people were getting hyped about the tournament is because she was giving people a storyline to follow in this great journey. And of course, it being the internet, I had to get just as many hate comments as I did positive ones, where people were like, what about so-and-so, Paige Beckers and Angel Reese? And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. We can celebrate multiple people at once, man. Like, this is all good. But yeah, she was phenomenal. That was an incredible run. And I mean, congrats to LSU in the end, because they showed up and scored triple digits when it mattered most. So
absolutely,
just a great game. But yeah, and I really think WNBA having a Bay Area team, like, they have 12 teams right now. If they can get it to 16, that's a great number for a league that can expand, give more players opportunity. And Bay Area has to be one of the 4 markets that I would imagine would be attacked if they were to expand it to that number. So
I'd hope so.
I'm eagerly waiting.
Yeah, it's a perfect market for it. It's kind of absurd if you think about it that we don't have a team here. And on that same note, I feel like the NBA is long overdue for their own expansion. I mean, part of the reason why you're seeing this weird Western Conference and these weird records this year, I think, is largely because of the fact that the talent pool in the NBA is just so deep that parity is starting to be reached in that level. I mean, every team is just so damn good. It's long past time to get a team in Seattle. First of all, I mean, that was just a crime that they lost their team. I'll never forgive, like, David Stern and what is it, David Schultz? Is that the Starbucks CEO who sold the team? That is just abysmal. It's embarrassing that they did that. The Sonics, the Seattle community needs a basketball team. I mean, for now, the Warriors, we take you with open arms until you get a team again. But yeah, I mean, in both regards, expand. It's long past time. The sport is too popular for the way it's limited right now, I think.
Before I'm not going to get too lost on tangents, but you talking about the Supersonics just made me think of my favorite memory, because I was in about 3rd grade when they made the move to Oklahoma City. So didn't get super familiarized with the Sonics. I know KD spent his rookie year there, but I think my favorite memory related to the Sonics is when LeBron was on the brink of winning that first championship with Miami. It was either the game he won or the game before, whichever one was in Miami. And you have just a whole crowd of white and red cheering really hard for the Heat, who are on the brink of overcoming this big hump in 2012. And then you just see some green, because in one of the front rows, you got a fan waving a Sonics flag, loudly cheering against the Thunder. So that was hilarious. And it's always going to burn in my memory.
Even Durant like has opinions on it. He loved Seattle. He was he was not happy that they moved to Oklahoma City. I don't know how anyone would be happy that you would move from Seattle to Oklahoma City. If you've never been to Oklahoma City, I've been to 34 states in this country. The only area I haven't visited yet is the Northeast. I've been to New York, but I haven't explored like Maine. So like I would conquer my last 16 if I just did one road trip from Maine down all the way to Georgia. But yeah, I mean, of all the states in the country that I just kind of look at and go, there's 2. One is Oklahoma and the other one is Iowa. In Iowa, I didn't visit the Field of Dreams. It was too far out of the way on my trip. So maybe there's a redeeming value there. But yeah, dude, Durant was not happy. I don't know who was happy outside of people who live in Oklahoma City and the owner who moved the team. That was a bummer, dude. Seattle had a great community and they got robbed, man. So I do hope they get a team back. And whatever that second city is, I imagine it's going to be Vegas. I can't believe that they're stealing the A's. Another tangent, right? But yeah, whatever that other team is, expand, Adam Silver, expand. It's time.
Oh, my poor 3-15 or whatever it is now, Oakland A's. That was a stinger too, but we probably knew it was going to happen for a while.
So greedy. It's just that just represents greed and selfishness and just. It's just closed-mindedness for so many different parties involved. I mean, Giants ownership for taking the San Jose territorial rights gifted to them by the Oakland A's just so that they would stay in the Bay Area and then not giving it back when the A's need it. That's just so selfish and greedy. But obviously the Oakland A's ownership themselves, I mean, what they've been doing for the last 10, 15 years is just embarrassing, man. I mean, it's sad. It's so sad. And now Vegas, like one of my closest friends is probably going to have to move with the A's to Vegas. And he has not said anything negative, but I can just read his mind and he can't be happy, dude. That sucks. But I digress. Sorry for the tangents.
We have both been absorbed in sports for a very long time, and betting was never a thing. Like, it was, in fact, it wasn't not a thing. It was this forbidden thing that broadcasters and media never talked about. And now I got a show right here where in the bottom right corner, it's presented by Bet Online, and Vegas has teams, and it's becoming this widespread phenomenon that's only going to grow. But yep. I could go on and on about that. I mean, back to the other basketball headlines, and then we'll get into Dubs Kings. Kawhi Leonard is out tonight for Game 3 of Clippers versus Suns. I do feel bad for him. I also feel very bad for Ty Lue and ownership at this point because, I mean, it was decided the Clippers were going to win a championship the second Kawhi signed in LA after coming off his Toronto stint, and it's just been kind of a mess ever since. I mean, the series is tied 1-1. Hope isn't lost, but I got to feel really bad for all parties involved, and I hope that Leonard's knee is okay, first and foremost. But I don't know what's going to come of that series if he can't play anymore.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, first of all, like, just I know this isn't entertaining, but are the Warriors and the Clippers series, are they both playing at the exact same time tonight?
The Clippers play first, I believe. Actually, I'm going to check the schedule right now because I can.
If that's the case, I know the Warriors are on TNT tonight, but then I saw today that Clippers Suns were playing tonight. I'm like, how does that work? Is Clipper, because those to me are the two most exciting playoff series that we have, and maybe Lakers Grizzlies is really entertaining too. So maybe those three, but to have to force one of those two series onto like NBA TV, which like most of the country doesn't get, that's crazy. I feel like you're shutting out a lot of people that should be watching that.
Anyways, I stand corrected. It's 76ers Nets at 4:30. We play at 7, and then 7:30. So a lot of overlap going on with Suns Clippers. I agree with you. I mean, if a lot of the schedule's built around TV and ratings, I'm not sure why they're doing that.
Makes no sense. Yeah, it's like, I mean, you can't figure that out. Like because it's going to be on NBA TV, right? I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Who? I mean, do you get NBA TV? I have no access to that. I don't know how I'm going to watch that. That's kind of crazy. It sucks. Well, I mean,
I do get NBA TV, but we'll probably not be flipping over to it unless it's just pure ugliness going on in TNT.
And if Kawhi is out, I mean, that the Suns should take care of business. But anyways, but yeah, that's another whole. The Warriors fans have their own worries right now. Besides that series, I'm sure they want to hear us talk about.
Happy news for Chris Paul. He broke his 13-game losing streak with Scott Foster reffing the game. Scott Foster, another Warriors classic, throwing out Sean Livingston. I'll never forget that one. Other news, the home teams that lost game 1 at home responded big in game 2. I'm talking about the Cavaliers, Suns, Bucks, and Grizzlies. Without Ja Morant, all evened it up at 1 apiece. And then a perfect transition into our series. Mike Brown is the first unanimous NBA Coach of the Year, and he's got a 2-0 series lead over the Golden State Warriors. And oh man, I don't know where this one's gonna go. Look, for anyone listening, we won't make this entire show a Draymond suspension discussion. I promise you that. I know Cyrus has already done a pair of episodes on the topic, but look, we're gonna be on the same page on a lot of it. So being two Warriors fans, we're talking about it, and we'll try to keep it to a minimum. But there's no way around discussing this, and that's that Draymond was suspended in the playoffs again for the incident of stepping on Domantas Sabonis in the fourth quarter of Game 2. This is 2016 all over again, and the Warriors are trying to avoid falling behind 0-3 in a series. And us basketball fans know that nobody has ever come back from a 3-0 deficit series in the NBA. The Warriors themselves are 0-9 in playoff series when they're trailing 0-2. They haven't done it since 2007, before Steph Curry was even a part of the team.
Exactly. So that stat's worthless, right? I mean,
right. And look, this team has conquered a lot of uphill battles, and they have a chance to even it at 2 games apiece, with the next 2 being at the Chase Center. Look, Cyrus, I want you to be able to reiterate some of your thoughts on the first 2 games and the suspension that followed before we move into Game 3. Tell the sideline screamers how you're feeling about this.
I mean, I feel like I've already vented. It's just time to move on. It sucks. Anyone who watches any of my programming or follows me knows that I did not agree with that at all. Even when it was happening in real time, and I remember they blew the whistle, I was like, what's going on here? And I didn't even notice Draymond doing anything wrong initially. I still I'm a firm believer in judging every incident on its own. The fact that the NBA is considering Draymond's past actions to me is absurd for the simple reason that, yes, they do tack on points if you have speeding tickets. Your past history is relevant in certain criminal cases for your credit, but there's also an expiration for it. Like the points you accrue with traffic violations go away. Debt goes away after 7 years. I mean, you can't just like bring that stuff up forever. And if that's your justification for completely screwing over the Warriors by taking out one of their best players, one of their most pivotal players, it's absurd. And I've never heard Rick Barry that upset when he was on with me for Locked On Warriors last night. I mean, he dropped a lot of BSs on there, and we're usually a family-friendly program. And I concur, man. I think they got robbed. I think Draymond's reputation got in the way of what should have been the correct call here. But what can they do? So now it's all about game 3 without him, and that's the focus, right? So here we are.
No, I'm with you, man. I think that going off of past incidences and not looking at an individual incidents, especially one that he actually didn't instigate, which we know he does do a lot. So I don't know. I mean, I did just realize, though, that Screaming from the Sidelines is a perfect name for a show discussing Draymond Green after seeing how he engaged with the crowd shortly before the ejection. And that's making me want to ask you this, as someone who knows the Warriors very, very well. What do you make of the fact that nobody was restraining him? Because in the past, we've seen guys like Andre Iguodala or Sean Livingston or Clay step in and try to restrain him a little bit. This time, they were just full on letting him go and chirping with the fans. Do you think that when you see that, it's more that they've just accepted it and that's just who Draymond is? Or could it be something more severe, like they're over it?
No. I don't think it's either that. I think it's, first of all, the way people are reacting to Draymond is very indicative. And I don't know if this will be a popular opinion or not. Maybe it won't. But it's very indicative of just how soft we've become in terms of our reaction to anything that might not be, a societal norm of behaving like properly and in a civil manner. And what I mean by that is, if you look at literally any other era of NBA basketball, and you would not blink twice at anything that Draymond's doing, any of it. And I'm talking like maybe you say 2005 and before, anything Draymond is doing now, people will not be batting an eyelash at it. They'd be like, "Oh, okay, well, that was an interesting play. Let's move on." And now it's like it's calling for a second postseason suspension. It's crazy. The game has gone completely soft in that regard, where it's just anything that is not, again, just in this whatever little box that Adam Silver and any individual that's running the league and making these decisions feels is a social norm. They're just gonna call you out for it, and it's just crazy to me. It's for someone my age who grew up watching like the Bad Boys, and that was a particular a point of concern for me, that Joe Dumars was one issuing this penalty. It's like, Joe, do you know your teammate was Bill Laimbeer, one of the dirtiest, most thuggish players in the history of this game? Like, Bill Laimbeer was trash, man. And that's the person who's now levying this penalty. Like, that's the epitome of hypocrisy. But then you also have to consider that Draymond Green looks up to Joe Dumars. Joe Dumars was almost like a godfather type mentor to him. Joe Dumars' son and Draymond grew up together, played AAU basketball together. They're best friends. Joe Dumars introduced Draymond to Ben Wallace and started that whole infatuation where Draymond had like the same hairstyle for a long time. So this was clearly an Adam Silver thing. Adam Silver was at the arena. Adam Silver saw Draymond doing those antics with the fans. And I think the reason why the players didn't step in that much is because just a game earlier, they were seeing E40 getting completely mistreated by both Sacramento Kings security, by other fans, where he's escorted out of the game to the point where the Kings came out and apologized for that. That is very important to know. They did the mea culpa and said they were wrong. They publicly said that. So the Warriors, I don't think, forgot that. I think the Warriors are very cognizant of just what they've been hearing and the way the Kings fans have been talking trash to them. They are just human beings. Those cowbells are probably driving them insane, hearing those things rattle. And those things, by the way, are banned from tonight's game at Chase Center. It should be noted. Like, any Kings fan who comes to Chase tonight is not allowed to bring those cowbells in there. They've actually made that a point of emphasis. So wow. I think it was more so that the Warriors, they're used to Draymond. What he was doing to the crowd and the way he was behaving was not out of the norm by Draymond standards. They were frustrated themselves. They just did not think it was a big deal. I mean, sources were telling Ramona Shelburne yesterday at ESPN that they were livid, frustrated by the decision. No one within the Warriors organization expected the suspension. And in the same ways, because they're so familiar with Draymond, they didn't think by his standards. I know it's relatively speaking, right? It's all about perspective, but by his standards, they didn't think what he was doing was egregious. And so they saw he was suspended. They saw that he was, just talking to some fans, and all he was doing was talking to fans and gesturing with his arm. And again, in any other era of professional basketball, that doesn't mean a damn thing. Now that gets you suspended for a pivotal game in a playoff series. It's just crazy, man. And it's all about perspective. If you're with the Warriors, Draymond, a lot of these individuals with Warriors like Steve Kerr remember the old NBA, and to them, they're probably shocked that this is what the game has turned to, where you have to act like a total gentleman on the court. And if you don't, now you might get suspended. And it's crazy to me. So that's my feeling, at least, on it.
All right, I got two things. One
Please.
is when Cyrus said the name Bill Laimbeer, if you're listening or watching and you don't know who that is, I want you to take 10 minutes when you're just in a good mood sometime and go to YouTube and type in some Bill Laimbeer good old highlights. My dad made me do that once, and it was an awesome period of my life spent just watching it. Just all around old school, tough, ruthless basketball. Back to Draymond.
Yeah.
By his standards, yeah, it was not anything out of the norm. He's a very passionate player. He's very unique, and he is very old school by that NBA standards.
Yeah.
The one thing I will ask you is that as far as yelling at the fans, hyping up the crowd, running around, in his words, having fun, I agree that there was nothing about that was over the edge. But the NBA's prized product is its fans, because that is their big source of revenue, and they want to have the best product. So when Draymond is yelling, P bombs and B bombs and things like that at certain fans in the heat of the moment, do you feel like that might be crossing somewhat of a line?
I mean, fine him. I don't think it's a line where you suspend him for a game. If you want to fine him for yelling profanities at fans, fine him. Fine. I mean, the fans were also doing it too. I mean, if you watch the replays, they had to blur out a lot of fans' mouths as well, because you could easily lip read what they were saying. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sitting here supporting it. I'm not sitting here condoning it. But what I am saying is the punishment doesn't fit the crime.
Well, that's actually a perfect transition into where I was going to go with this, because look, we know this has been talked about so much for 3 straight days before the suspension. Will there be a suspension? Oh, he is suspended. And it goes on. And at this point, we got to look forward to game 3. But the 3 points on the suspension that I wanted to offer, and I tried to go for something a little fresher that hasn't been played over 8 gazillion times, is the first point actually goes nicely with what you just said, which is that the ejection itself was already a punishment. And I'm gonna put up a slide right here, which was from ESPN. And this is the 7 minutes and 57 seconds of the fourth quarter of game 2 of the defense on the left. And then on the right was after the ejection, the final 7:03 of the game. The Kings have been great in the fourth quarter all year. It's why they won 48 games. It's why they protected their home court in the first 2 games of the series. I don't think it's some crazy coincidence that it all fell apart after Draymond left. And yes, I know the Warriors tied the game for a bit afterwards, but defense it needs to be sustained in a playoff game. And I think that's one of the criticisms on the regular season. And Draymond Green is that guy for the Warriors, playing a lot of that defense. And when the Kings go and shoot 10 for 15 and get 7 rebounds compared to 3 in what was like a pretty even split on time, then I think that's a problem. And it shows that the ejection was a punishment. Now, the second thing I'll go to is Adam Silver. Man, this would be a nice time to let everyone know that we are not related. I think he's done a great job as commissioner. But here, like, what are you doing? Like, your league gets criticized for star players taking too many nights off and not taking the regular season seriously. I mean, that is the fact of the matter. I understand you need to protect the fans. I understand that Draymond is constantly walking on a risky line. and fans are the golden source of revenue. But like taking Draymond away from a must-win Game 3 at the Chase Center is not improving your product, especially when it's one of the more unique and old school players in the modern game who is defined by defense. The third thing I would like to add is I want to provide some insight from Kings fans because I grew up around a lot of Kings fans. This is completely separate from anything that Cyrus or I think about the matter. I'm really fortunate to have grown up around a lot of these people. They're very dedicated, they're very respectful, and I still enjoy talking hoops with them, even when my team is down 0-2. And I asked them a series of questions, and they wrote me back some beautiful mini essays. And the general consensus is this: that the play on Tuesday was called correctly. Sabonis instigated, he deserved a technical foul, and Draymond escalated it with the step and then egging on the crowd, and he should have been tossed. They don't support the suspension, but they do kind of understand it could have happened to Draymond, knowing how he behaves in high intensity situations. And they think that as, you know, a player with his track record, he probably should know better. But even them, who desperately want to win this series, would prefer that we just move past it after Game 2. And why is that? Well, because it's taking away from the Kings playing really impressive basketball against the defending champs. They are not scared of the challenge. They play together. I think that's the it's the underlying storyline that's kind of been unsung going into the playoffs, which is like, yeah, the Kings haven't been here before, but they weren't plagued by injuries all year. This group got to play the whole season together and build chemistry. They have elevated in the fourth quarter. And let's be honest, even though the score of Game 2 was close, it just felt like a surefire ass kicking at times. And if the Kings make their open shots and don't shoot 23% from three, then that game gets out of hand a lot sooner. Now, that doesn't mean that the Warriors can't respond or that the Kings have already won the series. But instead of getting to enjoy this moment that they undoubtedly deserve, and Warriors fans should know this after suffering for 4 decades in between championships, like, they have to hear about this Draymond this, Sabonis that, dirty player this, referees that. And I know I just went on a long tangent about everything, but having just presented some of the Kings fan side of this, I want to hear some of your perspective on that and areas you might agree or disagree with.
Yeah, I mean, Charles Barkley made that point after the game emphatically, where, you know, he he thought this incident was taken away from talking about the Kings and how, look, the Kings are a great team. I mean, when I made my prediction originally, you know, a lot of people were saying, like, you know, Warriors sweep, Warriors in 5. I said Warriors in 6 just because I respected this Kings team to the point where I did not see the Warriors winning more than 1 road game. It just seemed a little too much that they would pull off 2 road wins. And look, my prediction could still come through. I mean, granted, the Warriors would have to win 4 straight, but you've seen how they play at home, which is why I'm not like overly concerned about tonight. I think the Warriors will take care of business. Now, granted, I said the same thing about games 1 and 2, and look where they are. But you know, they are a completely different beast at home. For me, so I guess my point is I do agree with Kings fans. Yes, your team is awesome. I mean, there's a reason why your head coach, who you stole away from us, you steal everything from us. You stole Luke Walton from us. That one didn't work out. Mike Brown did. Congratulations. You stole Leandro Barbosa from us. You stole Harrison Barnes from us. Congratulations. All right, little brother, it's all yours. But they have a great team. They do. I mean, you know, the Locked On Podcast Network has their own awards, and you know, in my MVP balloting, like I put De'Aaron Fox at 5. I honestly thought he had a phenomenal year. It's incredible they won that, or at least they didn't come out as losers in the Sabonis Halliburton trade, which is shocking because everyone was ripping the Kings, myself included, when the trade first happened. So yeah, I can't disagree with that premise. I get it. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, your fans of that arena aren't exactly like innocent. Because if what E40 said is true, that's kind of messed up, you know, that you're taunting like another fan. And E40's not a player; he's a fan. So you're taunting him there just because he's a high profile individual. You know, like your fans are not exactly well behaved themselves when they were talking back to Draymond. They don't have to say those things back to Draymond, but they didn't seem to have any hesitation. I'm still not going to forget that clip from a year ago when the courtside fan was just puking endlessly. at a Kings game on the court. If you've never seen that clip, check it out. Just Google it. It is, dude, it's ridiculous. Just the fans puking on the court, stalling the game for like 30 minutes. So if the Kings fans want to make it so about Draymond and they're pissed, look in the mirror for a second, because you're not exactly innocent. And I understand it's all about the individuals doing it, but still, I digress. Yeah, so, on one hand, I get it. I totally get it. It's taken away. But the good news for you Kings fans is if the series keeps going the way it does, and if your team is as good as you think it is, they should take care of business in round one, and then you will be hearing all about your team soon. And this will be, a forethought or an afterthought in due time. So I get it, man. The Kings are a great team. They are. There's no doubt. I never thought this was going to be an easy series. It's become exponentially harder. But the other thing I wanted to add too, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, Greg, or not, is that a huge question about the Warriors this season has been, why are they so bad on the road, right? They finished 11-30 on the road, the worst road record by a defending world champion in the history of this game in the modern era. There's a handful of teams that have had worse records, but they're like 1950s teams. And then you can't count the 99 Bulls just because that was a strike short season. That was a rebuilding team. They'd given up. So this is the worst. This is the worst road team in the modern era in terms of defending world champions playing on the road. And the big question was, why are they so bad on the road? And this series, I think, exposes that. I think we know now why they're so bad on the road. It's because their bench sucks. It's a thin bench. It's not a very talented bench. And home and road crowds, their impact is primarily on role players and bench players. They feed off crowds when they're at home, and those same crowds affect them tremendously when you're on the road. And there's two schools of thought here. If this series goes the way it's going and the Warriors are eliminated, in terms of like what went wrong, who to blame. And there's two fundamental figures here to blame. One is Joe Lacob for not I know he spends a ton. I get that. I know the payroll is astronomical. It's $300-400 million. But they're not losing money either, because if you look at the math in terms of the amount of revenue they brought in for all these deep postseason runs, every time the Warriors win a championship, they're earning close to $1 billion in additional revenue. They're fine. Okay, these are billionaire owners who could afford whatever the luxury tax penalty was last year to keep Gary Payton II and to go out there and add a big or two, even if it meant spending $7, $8, $10 extra million because you're in the luxury tax. And so for every million you spend, it could really be $8-9 million, depending on how many grades up it goes. So Joe Lacob, I think, does deserve some blame for not supporting Steph with the supporting cast that I think he deserves. This is a player that could go down in the history of the NBA as one of the all-time greats, Mount Rushmore level. Maybe even in the discussion with Jordan. Like, if the Warriors win a title this year, Jesus Christ, I don't know where you put Steph, but that would be such an unbelievable accomplishment. And to just let him down like that, I think Lacob clearly deserves a finger point. I mean, this bench was abysmal. I never understood why they never brought back Damian Lee. I never understood why they brought back Juan Toscano-Anderson. I was getting a lot of crap for constantly criticizing Kerr playing Lamb and Jerome. I never understood that. That did not result in success. You were taking minutes away from Moody and Kuminga that could have been used to develop them, make them better prepared for this moment. And that's what leads to the other finger point, which is Kerr. The way Kerr handled his team this year, I never understood it. And I've never had to criticize him this much in my life. I still love him as an individual. I'm still happy with him as the Warriors head coach. But what he did this year was just, it was an atrocity, man. He did not manage these minutes appropriately. He did not develop this roster appropriately to prepare for the postseason. And we're now in this situation where the Warriors are down 0-2. And those two individuals have to look in the mirror for that, man, because they brought a lot of this on themselves.
I mean, it's a fair point. And when, like the old saying goes, like, you are what your record says you are. And right now it's 0-2, and they were up and down all year. Like, I think what we have started to see, and my big observation through 2 games, is usually you can't draw conclusions early in series, right? Like, that's Twitter is the classic place for that. But I think there is a conclusion that can be drawn, which is the Warriors for the entirety of this year, despite all the inconsistencies, ups and downs, you name it, they have lived off of this 4-time champion talk. They have lived off of that. The dynasty was revived after the COVID years and being the worst team in the league when everyone was injured. And at some point, if you don't show up, nobody cares. And the Sacramento Kings clearly do not care. Now, I don't know how they're going to perform at Chase Center versus at Golden One, but the point is, nobody cares about this defending champ stock, and they're ready to play. So, yeah, I think it's a big deal when we talk about the bench, and in fact, that's where we're going to go, because we got Game 3 coming up, and Draymond's not playing, which means the margin for error is even slimmer than it was to begin with. Let's first talk about Jordan Poole, because he has been driving me insane the entire season. But I also understand that the Warriors desperately need Poole if they're going to win this series, because he brings youth and he brings offense. And that's two things that you need to have out there if you're playing against a team like Sacramento. What do you make of his lackluster postseason performance and him supposedly now playing on half a foot?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't do bad in game 1. He played 20 minutes, 21 minutes. I don't have the box score in front of me, but I thought he did fine in game 1. He certainly wasn't a liability. He did start the game off 2 for 2 from deep, and then did what he regularly does, which is one of his faults, which is he starts thinking he's Stephen Curry and taking shots that only Stephen Curry should be taking. And so I think his last three-point attempts were really deep shots that were completely unnecessary. Jordan Poole has been a polarizing figure this year for sure, because on one hand, defensively, he's a massive liability out there. He has not elevated his game in that regard at all. Like the player that he was last year, the player that he was this year, there has been virtually no improvement defensively. And he's also regressed in terms of shooting percentages and turnovers. But he did increase his scoring. He is a total playmaker. He doesn't let the moment get to him. He was the sixth man on a world championship team, which is very important to acknowledge. My feeling about Jordan Poole was that ankle injury he suffered in game 1 was severe. And I don't think he should have played in game 2. That was one of those instances where, again, this has just been a really bad year for Kerr, man. And he should have been more cognizant of the fact that his player is not moving well. Anyone could see it. Jordan Poole is an incredibly tough player. That's one of his positive attributes, where he has a very high threshold for pain. He loves the game of basketball. He will not make excuses to miss games. But that was a situation where I feel like Kerr should have stepped in and said, "Look, you're hobbling here. You're a liability much more than a bonus." And he should not have played. I mean, and that's evident by the fact that he only played 15 minutes in that game. I mean, Kerr finally realized himself how bad he was and just took him out for good. So in terms of game 3, if Jordan Poole is not feeling good enough with that ankle, I would recommend keeping him out again. I really would. It's all about, like, he needs to have his explosiveness and he needs to have that lateral movement defensively to be effective. And we saw in game 2 what happens if you play him without that. So what was the other question? I know you asked about Jordan Poole. Who was the other player? I forgot. I'm sorry.
No, it was just Poole.
Okay, yeah. So that's my thoughts on it. If he's healthy, you have to have him play. I don't know if he has to finish games. I think maybe pick and choose your spots for him. That's been one thing where Mike Brown has had coach Steve Kerr, is that it's not like Steve Kerr sometimes acts like the game's overly complex. Sometimes it's good to keep things simple. And Mike Brown has just basically looked at the Warriors, was like, yeah, Alex Len can play in this series. He's big. They're small. Trey Lyles is incredibly effective against his team, so I'm going to give him more minutes than usual. I don't actually know if that's true, but it feels like it. Malik Monk, yeah, he's lighting it up, so I'm just going to keep playing him. Whereas with Steve Kerr, it's like you don't see those kinds of what feels like common sense decision making. The fact that at times we saw a lineup with 4 point guards and Kevon Looney. I don't know why he thinks that's going to translate to success. I imagine in his mind, he's thinking it's more speed. He can match the intensity and pace of the Kings, but you got to play defense and you got to rebound and size. There's a reason why tall players thrive in basketball. It's like, you can't forget that. And it feels like sometimes Steve Kerr does. Festus Ezeli pointed out on a tweet how this team's sorely missing, a big man enforcer right now. They've always had centers in some regard, except for the team last year. But at least the team last year still had Otto Porter Jr. at 6'8", Nemanja Bjelica at 6'8", 6'9". You had Juan Toscano Anderson, who was starting games as a center during the regular season. This team is so thin when it comes to size. I know I'm totally diverting from the Poole subject, but in terms of Poole, I just think it's all about his health. If he's feeling fine, you have to play him. I mean, you can't just let him sit on the bench just because he's such a lightning rod offensively. He attracts defenders. They are focused on him. He's, they don't let him go. So for whatever, negatives about him there are, and that's mostly defense, right? Is that what you would criticize him for too?
I would say defense, and I will say to back you up, he is tough and he plays hard. He loves the game of basketball. Like that's not the issue, that he looks like he doesn't care out there. I think it does look like a little bit of a lack of focus sometimes, which is hard when you have 3 veterans who have won championships 4 times and been through crazy journeys, and it takes a lot of discipline. In fact, when I had Kylan on the show about a month or so back, we talked about the incident when Poole took the ill-advised shot, and then Steph was upset about it and threw his mouthpiece and got ejected. And then Poole ends up making the game-winning layup, and then they kind of hug it out in the tunnel. And it's one of those instances where it's like, okay, like, is everything okay, or is it just okay right now? And we're like, I don't know if we're going to have our answer until the postseason comes around. And so I think with Poole, like, defense is the obvious one, but he also just looks a little bit not focused out there, and because of his athleticism, he can get out of control.
Part of that is maturity. He's still a very young player. I mean, he doesn't turn 24 until next year. Like the best way I've heard him described is that he's the annoying little brother on this team. They do love him. Like, he is a player that the older veterans and his teammates, they do love him. He is part of the team. But he does annoy them. Like he annoys them sometimes, like a little brother does to the big brothers. And that to me is the most apropos description I've heard about on a metaphorical level in terms of Jordan Poole's role in this team. So you have to live and die with the mistakes. But the defense has been bad. And but Kerr's been adjusting. I mean, he only played 20 minutes in game 1, I think, for that reason, because he's such a liability. So, and in terms of, and like those 15 minutes that he played in game 2, that could have been 5 to 10 more minutes for Gary Payton II, who you have to play. GP2 only playing 20 minutes in game 1, I thought was a crime. I still think he didn't play enough in game 2. I don't know if he has the endurance to go 30 plus minutes, but if he does, you got to play him. He's one of the only guys doing anything out there. And then I don't know if you want to talk about Kuminga or not, because I've been a massively vocal critic of Kerr for not playing Kuminga in these 2 games. Those minutes could have also gone to Kuminga, and the fact that it didn't is, I think, a huge reason why this team's down 0-2.
No, that's fair. I mean, I will say that I fully am still a firm believer in Kerr's problem-solving ability. I think that just going through before this playoffs, me and my dad went through all the times where the Warriors were in trouble, going all the way back to 2015, second round, down 2-1 to the Grizzlies, and the big adjustment made was, let's put Andrew Bogut on Tony Allen because he's not a good offensive player. And it worked great. So this is not over by any means, but he does have his work cut out for him, as do the players. Look, I know I can't hold on to you forever. So one subject I wanted to touch on was, I know Kuminga and Moody, I would love to see them get minutes tonight without Draymond. But I heard you say something on a couple episodes ago for Locked On that I wanted to just push back on a little bit, which was the minutes of Andrew Wiggins, because I know he missed a lot of time pretty much from the entirety of the All-Star break onward. He was dealing with the personal matter with his father. But I would actually say that Wiggins did not and has not looked rusty in the first 2 games. And I know the shooting hasn't been amazing, only 1 for 8 from beyond the arc in the first game. But last game, he was probably the team's overall best player. And when the third quarter was getting really ugly, he was keeping us in the game. So what I want to ask you is that now, with the knowledge that Draymond is going to be out, are you okay with Wiggins playing normal minutes of 30 plus?
Well, so you do have to also bring up his shooting in game 2. He was 1 for 8 from 3 in game 1, which you can blame for rust, but you could also point out the fact that Wiggins opting to shoot that final 3 instead of attacking the paint and getting the easy bucket, that could have been the difference. I mean, they were only down by 1 at that point. Why Wiggins thought he should shoot a 3 there is beyond me. My whole argument with Wiggins playing too much is that he missed only 3 months. He didn't play any of those final regular season games because he didn't have conditioning, right? He didn't work out as much as Steve Kerr claimed he said he did in that one interview he did, where he said that he'd heard from they were talking to Wiggins and that Wiggins says he's maintaining his conditioning. Wiggins was not. And that's why we never saw him in that last week. And to suddenly not see him for 3 months and then for him to get 28 minutes in game one, I just thought that was a little excessive. I just thought you should ease him in a little more. And you got to look at his 3-point shooting, though. He's 3 for 16 in this series. He was 1 for 8 in game one, and he only improved by 1 shot in game two. He's only 2 for 8 in game two. And missing it, like Phil Jackson has a famous quote about missed 3-pointers. Every missed 3-pointer, especially from a corner, resulted in an easy fast break for the other team. So that is 13 missed threes that resulted in fast break points for the Sacramento Kings. I'm not saying every one of those were, but in theory they could be. And it puts so much pressure on the defense. You're right. This team is thin, so they need his size. They need his physicality. I just don't know if in game two they needed 39 minutes of him. And this is a second game back after missing 3 months. Why couldn't it be 30? Like why do you have to after not seeing him for this amount of time? I just felt you could have reduced the minutes a little more. Like he could have, instead of 28 minutes in game one, 20 in game one, and then give that run to Kuminga, give that run to JaMychal to get a little more size out there. In game two, 39 minutes, why not 32 minutes? And then distribute the minutes appropriately from there. So that's my argument. I'm not saying don't play him. I'm just saying, like, there are other players on this team that have been there all season who are more playoff ready than Wiggins was. And I would have preferred a more of an easement on his part. That was my whole point with Andrew Wiggins. I just don't see how anybody who misses 3 months, because here's the thing. Wiggins this season as a whole did not have a great year. I don't know if you remember when he came back the first time. He had his first injury ever as a player, that abductor injury. And when he came back from that, he missed a lot of time. It took him like almost a month to get his groove back. And then he missed time again because he had COVID and then a flu in separate instances, which that is just brutal. So he missed like a chunk of time for that. And then it took him like 2-3 weeks to get his game back from there. And then in fact, it was his last game before he missed the 3 months because of his dad that he finally looked like his old self. So I'm taking into account all of those moments in the regular season as well, where like he wasn't bouncing back from these absences and lighting it up. It takes him a while to warm up. And so I just thought Kerr was being really over-reliant on a player who was gone for so long. I don't doubt his value as an interior presence, because what we saw from him in terms of rebounding in the playoffs last year was extraordinary. It was a huge reason why they won the championship. But I just felt that he was rushing him a little too much. Now, given he's already played 2 games and he's getting his rhythm back, at this point, especially with Draymond down, and sources are saying that Wiggins at the 4 is something we're going to see a lot of tonight. So at this point, you're not going to hear me complain about it anymore, because it's what choice do you have? And, he's already played 2 massively full games. You're right. He does look great when he's attacking the rim. I wish he did that more. I wish we wouldn't see 8 3-point attempts from him each game. I think that's a little excessive. So I don't know. Does that make more sense now? I mean, if I didn't articulate, you still push back? I don't know.
No. I think that was a really great explanation, especially given the background context with the injuries, and he didn't have the same flow he did last year. Regardless, I think we're going to see a lot of Wiggins tonight. It's going to be his first game back in Chase for a while, so hopefully that gives him a little extra boost that the team needs. And I do think we're going to see JaMychal Green, because let's just pray that Kevon Looney does not get in too bad of foul trouble. But we're going to see JaMychal Green out there because somebody's got a defensive bonus. And because of size, we might also see Kuminga and his 6'8" frame, which I know you think very highly of. So
it's worth noting, too, like I saw this stat today, I think it was on ESPN, that so Draymond Green missed 9 games this year, and Kuminga started 8 of those 9 games. And in those 9 games total, Kuminga averaged 4.5 more points per game. He shot 40% from 3 in those games. And he's also a solid defensive player. He's in the top 20.7% of players in the NBA defensively in terms of opponents' field goal percentage. Like opponents that Kuminga guards shoot 45% from the field, which seems like a high number. But again, he's in the top 20% because most players actually shoot 50% or better from the field overall. And I know people keep pointing to his rebounding as a negative, which makes some sense. I mean, he did average 3.5 rebounds per game this season in 20 minutes of play, which is good, not great. But it's also very important to note that Kuminga, a huge reason why he's not grabbing more rebounds is because Kerr treats him similar to the way he does like a perimeter defender. Like when Kuminga's out there, Kuminga's not usually guarding opponents' bigs. He's usually out on the perimeter guarding the De'Aaron Foxes, guarding the John Morants. Like, he's getting really difficult defensive matchups from perimeter players, and he's welcoming it. He's taking on that task. I just really wish that Kerr had trust in him. I mean, I can't emphasize these stats enough that when he plays 25 or more minutes per game, the Warriors have won over 70% of those games. And in games where he's played 20 minutes or less, they've lost over 70% of those games. And the playoffs are just fueling those stats even more. I know he's young, but I'm just tired of people pushing back, saying he looked like a deer in the headlights. It's like, that's your opinion. Here are the facts. The facts are he shoots 37% from three this year. He's got a beautiful shooting form. He shot 52.5% from the field this year. He only averaged he only averaged 20 minutes per game. And in those 20 minutes, he averaged nearly 10 points per game. You look at his stats, and I don't see anything there that tells me he should not be playing more. He's an athletic freak. He's the only one out there that's putting down monster slams that really add momentum. I mean, that's a variable and an intangible that we don't talk about enough. I mean, those huge dunks quiet crowds down, like that Kings crowd was going crazy. You don't think a couple of Kuminga slams would have helped with that? It's just a fundamental difference between Kerr and I. And, I love Kerr. I don't know. He's just, there's a few things he's done in this whole dynasty that just the more I see of him, the more I see a man who I love personally. I've interviewed him one-on-one a handful of times, and we did a sit down together where we talked about surfing. I think he's a great guy, but I think his ego really took over this year, and he just exhibited this level of stubbornness. Like you point to the game 2 against Memphis, for example, that the adjustment of having Bogut on Tony Allen. Like, to me, that's not anything to write home about. That's a very simple adjustment. The big adjustment in that same year was in the NBA Finals when he started Andre Iguodala, but that wasn't even his idea. Now, he listened. I'm thankful he did that. But I've seen him do so many things. Like, Steve Kerr is someone who did not want Gary Payne II last year. I mean, I thought it was blatantly obvious that Gary Payne II was a gem in the 2021 season, that they really scored with him. And the Warriors' response to that was, we'll waive you, and if no one else picks you up, maybe we'll bring you back. The way he used JaVale McGee in the 2018 Western Conference Finals against the Rockets, that was a series that I strongly believe if Kerr had played McGee in that series extensively, that would not have gone as deep as it did. I mean, seeing Capella grab those boards, I'm still haunted by that. And you had JaVale McGee just sitting there on the bench. So there's just so many different moments that where he just really has dropped the ball as a head coach. The flip side to that is the NBA is full of inept head coaches. Like, there are so few good head coaches that Steve Kerr, even with this, is still one of the best. But I don't know if he needs a better assistant. I don't know, man. I just hope he opens up and becomes more open-minded in terms of the young players, because they're going to need them. The Kings have more energy. They're more athletic. They're just running this team up and down the court. And the only thing you have to combat that on your roster are these two young players who are big. They're athletic. They were on a championship team last year, so it's not like they lack postseason experience. They both were starting games last year. Let's please see these two. That's what I'm advocating for. I want some Kuminga minutes tonight. But good things happen when Kuminga plays. That is my motto.
All right. Well, I hope that Steve Kerr right now has a chance to prove himself a little bit more to you. And the Golden State Warriors can take Game 3. And I hope that you have at least another week of being able to talk about games. And thank you so much for coming on.
What do you think's going to happen, man? What's your prediction?
I'm thinking good thoughts and putting positive energy into the air. So I would like to say we will even the series at 2 apiece. I do not take anything for granted.
I will say this, if the Warriors tonight, so the voice of the Sacramento Kings, Mark Jones,
yeah,
he texted me after Game 2, after the Draymond suspension, and he was like, if this doesn't rally the Warriors, nothing will. And I wholeheartedly agree. The Warriors are awake right now. They're pissed about this thing. They understand what it's going to take to win without Draymond. And if the Warriors win tonight, that's going to be a massive momentum shifter, because you just proved you can win this a game against the Kings without your best defender, without your best big player. And if they win games 3 and 4, you're going back to Sacramento with a lot more momentum. Anything could happen at that point. I mean, this series is far from over. But so far it's been discouraging, right? I mean, we just have to hope for the best at this point. Great to be on, by the way, man.
No, absolutely. I mean, I can't wait to go watch this game, and we'll have to
Yeah,
do this again soon.
same. Please.
But yeah, thank you so much, and
Yeah,
this was great. I love talking Dubs with anybody, and especially someone who is so invested in it, where like the
yeah.
emotion and the passion comes out.
It does, man. I do care a lot about this team, man. I mean, I started playing basketball like CYO. I think it was like 7 or something like that, and the Warriors were the team. Like I remember just one day, like I turned on the TV and there was like Sleepy Floyd and Mullen, and I just was like, Mom, Dad, I want to play basketball. And this is back when my parents were together, and so they signed me up for CYO, and I've just been a basketball junkie ever since. And the Dubs were my team, man, for better or worse. I try to approach it objectively. I do think it's possible. But yeah, sometimes the fan comes out, and what are you gonna do? But Greg, thank you so much for having me on, man. Yeah, let's do this again soon for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Once again, guys, you can follow him on Twitter at DogSurf Roadshow and listen to Locked On Warriors if you want more content on the Golden State Warriors. We hope that they can hold on just a little bit longer. Game 3 is tipping off very soon. And depending on what happens there, it could be a whole different discussion moving forward. Don't forget, as always, like, share, subscribe. Just be crazy. And it's the playoffs, man. I got nothing else to say except keep screaming.